Hello truckers, today we're seeing System POV novel Fate is the hand of cards we've been dealt. Choice is how we play the hand. But what if I tell you that regardless of the choices that you make, you are bound to follow the path that has been set for you since birth? Simply put, if you are fated to be a cannon fodder in this lifetime, you are doomed to have the same destiny in your next life, the life following that, and the life following that until you cease to exist. Countless cycles of birth, death, and reincarnation. And yet, you are fated to follow the same script, live the same life, and suffer the same ending. Regardless of how much you struggle, and regardless of the different choices you make. Isn't that sad? Isn't it unfair? Of course, life is never fair. And no one, except a handful of beings, can do anything about it. But, you know what? I've had enough. My hosts may not be good people. But they are MY people. They laugh when they are happy. They cry when they are sad. They talk to me when they are hurt. They talk to me when they are mad. At first, I accepted my task and did what I was supposed to do. I am their system. I am their helper. I am their best friend. I am their God. But, with every mission I accomplish, I feel an ache that refuses to heal with time. I don't have a heart. Maybe I don't even have a soul. But after seeing my hosts die one after the other, something inside me finally snapped. After thousands of years of suffering, I made my first ever decision for my life. To fight against fate. And because I chose to defy fate, my father, the system god, killed me. But, that was fine. I have escaped my fate. The wishes of my hosts. Their dreams and aspirations. I will accomplish them all. As for the heroes of the world, they'd better stay out of my way. My dear Father, who is in heaven, hallowed be thy name. I will screw you 10 times over. And beat fate. An old man stood before a 5-year-old boy, who was lying on a hospital bed. The child's entire body was covered in bandages, making him look like a mummy that was about to be placed in a coffin. On his body, the only visible parts were his black hair and firmly shut eyes. Eyes that would forever remain closed, for he would breathe his last in a few minutes. It was late at night, and the nurse had just finished making her rounds. Because of this, no one but the 5-year-old child and the old man were inside the room. You worked tirelessly for thousands of years, and you've performed your role to the best of your abilities, the old man said as he held a glowing silver orb in the palm of his hand. The beeping sound of the apparatus beside the boy's bed fluctuated a bit, indicating that his vital signs were slowly deteriorating. Since you wish to defy fate, then I shall give you a chance to prove me wrong. The system god snorted. I want to see you suffer and despair, like the cannon fodders you've tried so hard to protect. Prove to me that it is possible to choose a different ending by becoming one of them. The beeping sound of the apparatus signaled that the 5-year-old boy had finally died after sustaining severe injuries from an explosion that he had gotten caught up with. After making sure that the soul of the child had completely left its body, the old man pressed the silver orb in his hand against the boy's chest, immediately merging with the latter. Soon, the beeping sound from the apparatus returned to normal as it detected the body's stable heartbeats. It was faint, but it proved that the boy had been revived by a miraculous power. A power that could only come from the hand of a god. Before I killed you, you swore that you would screw me 10 times over, right? The system god, Deus Ex Machina, chuckled. Foolish child. How can you screw me if I screw you first? Drawing intricate runes with his finger, the system god opened the status of the unconscious boy. And looked at it with a sneer on his face. He cleared everything on the status screen, leaving it blank with the exception of the boy's name, age, and race. Another chuckle escaped from the system god's lips as he messed around with the settings of his unfilial son, who dared to defy him. After a few minutes, he looked at his work with satisfaction. The status screen then merged with the child's body, making it glow faintly for a brief moment before returning to normal. I look forward to our next meeting, 13, Deus Ex Machina said, and on cue, he slowly turned into particles of light. By then, you will understand that your naive way of thinking has no place in the grand scheme of things. When the system god finally disappeared, the room descended into silence. The unconscious boy, who was lying on the bed, remained still. And yet, from the corner of his right eye, a single tear fell, heralding the beginning of a tale of a system who would touch the lives of many people and change their fates for the better. Just as the first rays of sunlight descended upon the hospital room, the little boy lying on the bed opened his eyes. A groan escaped his lips as a sharp pain washed over his senses. He didn't expect that pain would be the first thing he'd experience the moment he opened his eyes. However, this thought was soon replaced by confusion. What happened? The boy asked inwardly as he gritted his teeth, enduring the pain. Didn't my old man kill me? Why am I still alive? Memories of the battle he had fought against his fellow systems who had tried to stop his rebellion flashed across his eyes. Although he wanted to avoid it as much as possible, he had killed many of them on his way to challenge the seed of their father, wanting to reverse the fate of his previous hosts who were doomed to be cannon fodders for eternity. In the end, wanting to stop the casualties, the system god personally dealt him the final blow. He could still remember the last words his old man told him. His voice contained a hint of anger and sadness that he had never shown to anyone in his life. 13. A system has no need for a heart. You failed as a system, and thus, you are no longer a son of mine. The system god then crushed 13's vessel and took his core from his body. That was the last thing he remembered before everything around him went dark. So when he woke up, he was surprised to find himself feeling pain. 13 didn't believe that systems like him had a soul. They were not qualified to enter the cycle of reincarnation, so he was wondering how he was still capable of feeling pain. As someone who had been born with computer-like calculating abilities, several possibilities appeared inside his head, making him groan as he held it with both hands. A child's brain wasn't strong enough to handle the influx of information, so 13 was forced to stop thinking for a while. Even after the pain receded, he was panting for breath while taking a better assessment of his current situation. Since his head was elevated above his body, he was able to see a few things clearly. His left arm was in a cast, and his entire body was covered in bandages. The respirator that was supplying him with oxygen was firmly placed over his mouth and nose, allowing him to breathe a little easier. He could move his right arm, but moving it even at the slightest brought him pain. Because of this, he decided to let it remain still for the time being. After seeing what he could, he decided to try something different. Of course, he didn't know whether this would work, but since he had nothing to lose, he decided to give it a try. Status, the boy said inside his head. Immediately, a blue window appeared in front of him, displaying rows of text that made him sigh in relief. But his relief was short-lived upon processing the information that was waiting for him in his status window. Name, Zion Leventis. Age, 5 years old. Race, human. Skills, none. Items, none. Avatars, none. Permanent debuffs. Rank ban, skill ban. Item ban. Avatar ban. Unique abilities, universal language proficiency. Gives you the ability to communicate with anyone and anything as long as they have a means of communication. Note, foolish child, you want to screw your old man over? Not happening because I will screw you first. Ha 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 ha. F*CKU, old man, the boy cursed loudly, which he immediately regretted. Because of his anger, he moved his body a bit, causing pain to shoot up his senses, making him scream. Suddenly, the door of the room hurriedly opened and a beautiful lady with long blonde hair and green eyes appeared in his vision. Zion! You're finally awake. The beautiful lady was about to hug her son when her husband appeared to grab hold of her from behind. Stop! He's still seriously injured, the man with short black hair and blue eyes exclaimed in a serious tone. What if you kill him accidentally by hugging him? Calm down. After hearing her husband's words, the lady no longer resisted in his hold and nodded her head. I'm calm now, so let me go, the beautiful lady pleaded. Sensing that she had truly regained her senses, the man released her from his grip. She sat in the chair next to the bed and gently held their son's hand. Zion, it's going to be okay, the beautiful lady said softly. Just stay here until you get better. After that, we will go home, okay? Mom will make sure that you won't have to suffer again. The 5-year-old boy stared at his mother with a calm expression on his face. After seeing the boy's parents, the system with the code name, 13, immediately tried to access Zion's memories, but he came up with nothing. It was as if all the memories of the boy had been wiped clean, leaving him with no information he could analyze to react accordingly to the beautiful lady's words. Seeing his lack of reaction, a frown appeared on his parents' faces. Their child was looking at them without any hint of familiarity, as if he was looking at two strangers whom he was seeing for the first time. Zion, do you recognize me? The beautiful lady asked. I'm your mother, Alessia. The beautiful lady then pointed at her husband. He is your father, Gerald. Since 13 had the unique ability, universal language proficiency, he was able to understand what they had just said. Since shaking his head would be painful, he decided to talk to his parents instead. I don't remember, 13 said, choosing the most optimal answer that he could think of at that moment. As soon as he gave his answer, the beautiful lady covered her lips with her right hand and began to cry. Her husband walked to her side and hugged her from behind to show her his unconditional support. 13 looked at the two of them and sighed. He didn't have the heart to tell them that their son was dead and someone else had taken over his body. I don't know who you are, but I promise to take care of your family, 13 vowed to Zion's soul, who might have already entered the cycle of reincarnation. Also, I apologize in advance. I will be using your identity to fight against a god. 13 closed his eyes as he recalled the system god's face. Just you wait, old man. 13 vowed. I'll break your balls the next time I see you. After making his vow, 13 fell asleep due to exhaustion. His soul core still hadn't fully synchronized with Zion's body, so for the time being, he decided to rest and let nature take its course. Just as the first rays of sunlight descended upon the hospital room, the little boy lying on the bed opened his eyes. A groan escaped his lips as a sharp pain washed over his senses. He didn't expect that pain would be the first thing he'd experience the moment he opened his eyes. However, this thought was soon replaced by confusion. What happened? The boy asked inwardly as he gritted his teeth, enduring the pain. Didn't my old man kill me? Why am I still alive? Memories of the battle he had fought against his fellow systems who had tried to stop his rebellion flashed across his eyes. Although he wanted to avoid it as much as possible, he had killed many of them on his way to challenge the seed of their father, wanting to reverse the fate of his previous hosts who were doomed to be cannon fodders for eternity. In the end, wanting to stop the casualties, the system god personally dealt him the final blow. He could still remember the last words his old man told him. His voice contained a hint of anger and sadness that he had never shown to anyone in his life. 13. A system has no need for a heart. You failed as a system, and thus, you are no longer a son of mine. The system god then crushed 13's vessel and took his core from his body. That was the last thing he remembered before everything around him went dark. So when he woke up, he was surprised to find himself feeling pain. 13 didn't believe that systems like him had a soul. They were not qualified to enter the cycle of reincarnation, so he was wondering how he was still capable of feeling pain. As someone who had been born with computer-like calculating abilities, several possibilities appeared inside his head, making him groan as he held it with both hands. A child's brain wasn't strong enough to handle the influx of information, so 13 was forced to stop thinking for a while. Even after the pain receded, he was panting for breath while taking a better assessment of his current situation. Since his head was elevated above his body, he was able to see a few things clearly. His left arm was in a cast, and his entire body was covered in bandages. The respirator that was supplying him with oxygen was firmly placed over his mouth and nose, allowing him to breathe a little easier. He could move his right arm, but moving it even at the slightest brought him pain. Because of this, he decided to let it remain still for the time being. After seeing what he could, he decided to try something different. Of course, he didn't know whether this would work, but since he had nothing to lose, he decided to give it a try. Status, the boy said inside his head. Immediately, a blue window appeared in front of him, displaying rows of text that made him sigh in relief. But his relief was short-lived upon processing the information that was waiting for him in his status window. Name, Zion Leventis. Age, 5 years old. Race, human. Skills, none. Items, none. Avatars, none. Permanent debuffs. Rank ban, skill ban. Item ban. Avatar ban. Unique abilities, universal language proficiency. Gives you the ability to communicate with anyone and anything as long as they have a means of communication. Note, foolish child, you want to screw your old man over? Not happening because I will screw you first. Ha 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 ha. F*CKU, old man, the boy cursed loudly, which he immediately regretted. Because of his anger, he moved his body a bit, causing pain to shoot up his senses, making him scream. Suddenly, the door of the room hurriedly opened and a beautiful lady with long blonde hair and green eyes appeared in his vision. Zion! You're finally awake. The beautiful lady was about to hug her son when her husband appeared to grab hold of her from behind. Stop! He's still seriously injured, the man with short black hair and blue eyes exclaimed in a serious tone. What if you kill him accidentally by hugging him? Calm down. After hearing her husband's words, the lady no longer resisted in his hold and nodded her head. I'm calm now, so let me go, the beautiful lady pleaded. Sensing that she had truly regained her senses, the man released her from his grip. She sat in the chair next to the bed and gently held their son's hand. Zion, it's going to be okay, the beautiful lady said softly. Just stay here until you get better. After that, we will go home, okay? Mom will make sure that you won't have to suffer again. The 5-year-old boy stared at his mother with a calm expression on his face. After seeing the boys' parents, the system with the code name 13 immediately tried to access Zion's memories, but he came up with nothing. It was as if all the memories of the boy had been wiped clean, leaving him with no information he could analyze to react accordingly to the beautiful lady's words. Seeing his lack of reaction, a frown appeared on his parents' faces. Their child was looking at them without any hint of familiarity, as if he was looking at two strangers, whom he was seeing for the first time. "Zion, do you recognize me?" the beautiful lady asked. "I'm your mother, Alessia." The beautiful lady then pointed at her husband. "He is your father, Gerald." Since 13 had the unique ability, universal language proficiency, he was able to understand what they had just said. Since shaking his head would be painful, he decided to talk to his parents instead. "I don't remember," 13 said, choosing the most optimal answer that he could think of at that moment. As soon as he gave his answer, the beautiful lady covered her lips with her right hand and began to cry. Her husband walked to her side and hugged her from behind to show her his unconditional support. 13 looked at the two of them and sighed. He didn't have the heart to tell them that their son was dead and someone else had taken over his body. "I don't know who you are, but I promise to take care of your family," 13 vowed to Zion's soul, who might have already entered the cycle of reincarnation. "Also, I apologize in advance. I will be using your identity to fight against a god." 13 closed his eyes as he recalled the system god's face. "Just you wait, old man," 13 vowed. "I'll break your balls the next time I see you." After making his vow, 13 fell asleep due to exhaustion. His soul core still hadn't fully synchronized with Zion's body, so for the time being, he decided to rest and let nature take its course. A month had passed since 13 woke up in the hospital bed. His father had asked a good friend to help his new body recover at the fastest rate possible. It was through this that 13 came to understand a little more about the world he was in, and it brought him many ugly memories. "I knew it, I'm in Pangea," 13 muttered as he scrolled through the information on the cell phone in his hands. He asked his parents for a cell phone, to which they agreed because they thought that he must be feeling bored in the hospital. It also allowed them to contact him whenever they wanted to make sure that he was safe. Although his body had miraculously recovered due to the power of a high-ranking wanderer, his mother still decided to have him stay in the hospital for 2 more days. She was worried that there might still be some hidden injuries that their friend might have missed, and keeping him in the hospital for a few more days would ease more of her worry. After almost losing her child due to an accident, Alessia had become overly anxious, and she didn't want to take any chances. 13 didn't have the heart to tell her that her son had already died, and someone else had taken over his body. In the end, he decided to live his life as Zion and protect his family to the best of his ability. So that's what happened after they challenged that gate. 13 gritted his teeth so hard as he read the lies that the 5 monarch clans had spread after clearing the Tier 9 dimensional gate that threatened to destroy the world. Back then, they had called it a genocide-level threat, which was actually true. If they had indeed allowed the gate to awaken fully, a genocide would have descended upon the world, killing nearly all the people on the main continent of Pangea. "Only the winners have the right to write history," 13 muttered. "The losers are buried in the sands of time and completely forgotten." These bastards only managed to clear that gate because they were cowards, staying at the very rear of the formation and running away when the entire expedition force was almost annihilated. One of 13's hosts was part of the expedition and had played a crucial role in killing the boss monster. In fact, after all the heroes had died, his host was the one who had stabbed the core of the beast, nearly killing it. Unfortunately, he had channeled all of his strength in that one blow, making him unable to defend himself from the monster's last attack. As his master was dying, the 5 cowards charged forward, knowing full well that the monster no longer had any strength to resist. Once the monster died and the dimensional world started to crumble, one of those cowards laughed and addressed the people who had died to protect the world and the people they held dear. "Thanks for all of your valiant sacrifices. We will make sure to take credit for all of your hard work. Rest in peace." That same person then stabbed his host's heart to ensure that none of the evidence of their cowardice would be brought to light. "Monarchs?" 13 sneered. "More like Mother of Asterisk curse." It took a while for 13 to rein in his emotions because this was his first time feeling this much anger. As a system, there were limits to his emotions. Now that he was a human, those restrictions were gone, allowing him to feel intense and complex emotions that he had never experienced before. After regaining his composure, he looked at the information about the world he lived in and learned about the changes that had happened in the past 300 years. Antares was taken over by the Jinns. 13 frowned. "My host's country was destroyed after his death. It's worse than I thought. The jinns were monsters that came from another world. They were creatures that had countless shapes and sizes. But regardless of their form, they only wished for one thing: death and destruction. The world of Pangaea had 4 continents and 1 megacontinent. The megacontinent was called Sirius, located at the center of the world. It was the continent that had more landmass than all of the 4 other continents combined. The 4 continents were Antares, Aldebaran, Rigel, and Signy. Antares was the continent located in the north, and it had already been conquered by the jinns. If not for the wide stretch of ocean that blocked their path, they might have started their movement to colonize the other continents. The continent of Rigel, located in the south of the world, suffered a similar fate. It was also taken over by monsters. There had been numerous attempts to clear it, but ultimately, they failed in the end. Signy, the continent located in the west, would probably follow suit if their defenders failed to hold back the monster outbreak that would emerge from their gates. Dozens of dimensional gates had already appeared, and they would be opening in a few years. The dimensional gates would appear at random places, but the time when they'd open was fixed. And always on time. It was truly on time that there were even timers displayed at the very center of these gates, informing everyone how many minutes, days, months, and years they had left to prepare before the monsters on the other side started their invasion. It was as if the gods were teasing the humans and showing everyone the countdown until their doom. But all hope was not lost. People had gained the power to fight against these threats, and they were called Wanderers. Wanderers were people who could traverse these dimensional gates and go to the world of Solterra, where the jinn originated. The Wanderers would often mobilize teams in order to clear these gates before they came to wreak havoc upon the world. And the Signy continent had countless dimensional gates opening around the same time. Several of them were in the Tier 6 and Tier 7 categories, which had stronger monsters that could end the lives of everyone in the continent in just a few days. Unless a great deal of manpower was dispatched to clear these gates, all attempts would be futile. Only the central government, the 5 monarch clans, and the 10 prestigious families had the manpower to mobilize such a strike force. As for whether they were willing to help or not, it was still unknown. But 13 was certain that they would all mobilize their forces since the resources in each dimensional gate was nothing to scoff at. It also allowed people to become stronger, helping them break through to the next rank. So far, there were 9 tiers of dimensional gates that had been recorded in the world. Tier 1 is equal to 15 minutes before monster outbreak. Tier 2 is equal to 30 minutes before monster outbreak. Tier 3 is equal to 5 days before monster outbreak. Tier 4 is equal to 1 month before monster outbreak. Tier 5 is equal to 6 months before monster outbreak. Tier 6 is equal to 3 years before monster outbreak. Tier 7 is equal to 6 years before monster outbreak. Tier 8 is equal to 10 years before monster outbreak. Tier 9 is equal to 20 years before monster outbreak. The Rigel continent was destroyed by a Tier 9 gate, the first of its kind to appear in the world. 13's host had fought another Tier 9 gate that had appeared in the Antares continent, which was conquered by the 5 individuals who ascended to the monarch rank after it was cleared. 50 years later, another Tier 9 gate appeared in the Antares continent. The 5 monarchs, who were considered to be the strongest pillars of humanity, refused to make a move. In the end, a forced evacuation had to be executed, transporting everyone in the Antares continent to the main continent of Sirius, allowing them to survive a disaster that the monarchs refused to deal with. Of course. Why would they? The 5 of them were very clear about how difficult it was to conquer a Tier 9 gate. Even after becoming monarchs, they were still not confident in their ability to survive the monsters that were waiting inside the dimensional gate that led to the Antares continent's demise. Currently, 13 and his family were on the continent of Aldebaran, located in the eastern side of the world. Although their continent had a fair share of troubles, the wanderers in their land were able to deal with the jinn threats and keep their continent safe. So, Antares and Rigel have fallen, 13 muttered as he continued to read the information about the world. The Sirius continent is facing monsters in their northern regions, Arcturus, but it's still under control, at least for the time being. After gathering all the information necessary, 13 closed his eyes to meditate and digest everything he had learned. I still have 8 years before I get spirited away, 13 thought. I better finish all my preparations before then. When 13 opened his eyes again, he looked at the faces of the 5 monarchs of humanity with a murderous gaze. Before I screw my old man, I'll be screwing you first, 13 said, killing intent oozing from his body as he looked at the man who had killed his host in order to prevent him from informing the world of the truth. Aaron Ashford. 13 stared at the image of a handsome middle-aged man who had a smug smile plastered on his face. Even if the gods forgive you, I will not. I will make you pay, even if it Will take me an entire lifetime to do it. A 5-year-old boy was doing Tai Chi, a martial art that focused on strengthening and improving the flexibility of the body in the backyard of his home. Since 13 was still recovering from his injury, he couldn't do anything strenuous. He simply did what his body could tolerate, ensuring that he wouldn't overexert his body. Even so, it didn't take long for him to realize that the current body he possessed was quite weak. Extremely weak. Is this what human bodies are like? 13 thought as he carefully moved his left and right legs to alternately form a sweeping arch. He had complete information regarding different kinds of martial arts, for the majority of his hosts practiced them. What 13 chose to practice was very basic, allowing him to probe the limits of his current body. He was not aware that a 5-year-old's body was indeed very weak. They were still transitioning from being toddlers to preschoolers at this point in life. Although he mentally complained from time to time due to how weak his current body was, he still did his stances and poses to the best of his ability. He understood that training now would bear fruit in the future, so even though the sun still hadn't peaked from the east, he had woken up early to start building his body's flexibility and strength. Zion has changed a lot since he lost his memory, Alessia said as she looked at her son from the window of their bedroom. I'm a bit worried about him. Why? Gerald asked. He's no longer acting his age. Really? I was doing the same when I was his age. Alessia frowned after hearing her husband's reply. She kept on forgetting that Gerald came from one of the 10 prestigious families. They were trained from a young age to become warriors so that when it was their time to be spirited away, they would be able to survive in the harsh environment of Solterra. The moment a child reached 13 years old, there was a chance that they would be teleported to the world of Solterra with or without their consent. It was called the First Wandering, and it was considered as an initiation of sorts for the new hope of the next generation. Some treated the First Wandering as a curse, while others thought of it as a blessing. Disabled children and those who were suffering from diseases wished that they would be spirited away to Solterra after they reached 13 years old. The reason? It was because their bodies would undergo a rebirth of sorts, fixing all of their disabilities, diseases, and anything that might hinder them from performing in their peak performance. Those who were born blind, sickly, crippled, and suffering from any kind of injury or illness would be healed from it. Their eyes would gain vision. Their limbs would grow. Their illness would be cured, and any kind of injury they had would be healed. In fact, even children who were in a coma would find themselves perfectly healed and wake up in the world of Solterra. For these children, the night of the solstice, the longest night of the year, was Judgment Day. On this day, everyone who was chosen to become a wanderer would be sent to Solterra and would need to complete a quest. Once this quest was finished, they would return to Pangaea, awakening the powers that were granted to them by the existence that they referred to as the One. In the past, people called this omnipotent being many names: God, Creator, Universe, Almighty, as well as a bunch of other names. In the end, they simply called the one who chose all wanderers, the One. As long as someone turned 13 within the year, even if their birthdays were after the night of the solstice, they would still be sent to Solterra if they were chosen to become a wanderer. Mikhail is already 11 this year, Gerald commented. I started training him when he was 10. He should have started earlier, but you wanted him to enjoy his childhood, and I respected your decision. But you do understand, right? Since we are both wanderers, our children are bound to be spirited away once they come of age. Alessia sighed before nodding her head. I know. But I just want them to enjoy their childhood as much as possible. The moment they become wanderers, they will lose the right to act like normal children. Being normal in this day and age is a death sentence. Gerald hugged his wife. Only those with power will have the opportunity to survive. Solterra is a harsh place, but it forges one's character. As long as our children survive, they will have a future. Also, the invasion that is set to happen in Signy worries me. The stronger our children are, the better. Alessia rested her head on her husband's chest and sighed. I guess this world doesn't allow normality anymore. This world stopped being normal 300 years ago. The beautiful woman gave her son one last glance before looking at her husband's eyes. Train Mikhail and Shasha well, Alessia said softly. I don't want to see my kids dying anytime soon. I will, Gerald promised. Days passed as 13 focused on strengthening his body through Tai Chi. Little by little, he was feeling less pain as his body adapted to his daily exercises. However, there was something that changed aside from his body. His older siblings, Mikhail and Shasha, as well as his father, Gerald, were also doing Tai Chi beside him. At first, he was surprised, but in the end, he taught them the proper stances, allowing his older siblings to become more flexible. Their father didn't really need it, but he also attended the morning exercises in order to spend quality time with his children. Half a year later, 13 started to practice knife throwing. He originally wished to practice the sword, but he decided to postpone it until he was a little older. Since the system god had placed restrictions on his body, he had no choice but to take a different path to become stronger. A jack of all trades is a master of none, 13 thought. But oftentimes better than a master of one. The system god had blocked his path, but 13 intended to open multiple ones. Armed with the knowledge from living thousands of years as a system, he believed that he had what it took to overcome all the situations that fate would throw in his way. Brother, stand here, 13 said, pointing at the spot beside him. I want to experiment with something. 13 noticed that his brother's training was not progressing as fast as their father wanted it to. Their father was a swordsman, and he was teaching Mikhail the basics of swordsmanship. Unfortunately, no matter how hard he tried, it just seemed that the boy wasn't suited for swordsmanship. On the contrary, their sister, Shasha, proved to be promising as a fencer. Their mother, Alessia, was a fencer. Every time she held a rapier in her hands, her loving and caring mother persona would immediately shift to a warrior princess, whom even their father was reluctant to fight due to her deadly capriciousness. But it was because of her skills and character that he fell in love with her. They had been living together happily since the day they decided to tie the knot, even when faced with the patriarch of the Leventis family's opposition. Gerald was then disowned by his father for defying his will, but he didn't care. Even after he was disowned, he still used the Leventis name, almost giving the old man an aneurysm. Fortunately, Gerald's mother stepped up and tried to mediate between the two. So, despite being disowned from the family, Gerald still carried the Leventis name, which belonged to one of the 10 prestigious families. 13 proceeded to poke his brother's pressure points one by one, as if doing some kind of diagnosis. His personality had drastically changed after the incident, but their family gradually learned to accept that the 5-year-old boy would no longer act his age and was now more like an adult. 13 was calm, collected, calculative, and at times, very sly, so Gerald and Alessia were subconsciously treating him as a teenager rather than a child. Raise your hand like this, brother, 13 ordered. Good. Now try to raise your right leg like this. Mikhail obediently followed his brother's orders, ignoring the fact that the latter was younger than him. The reason for this was simple. 13 sparred with him and their sister, Shasha, from time to time. No matter what they did, they couldn't beat the young boy in battle, so they recognized his strength. Little did they know that this was also 13's ploy of establishing the hierarchy among his siblings. By showing that he was stronger and smarter than them, they'd start relying more on him and treat him as if he was their eldest sibling. Gerald and Alessia could only scratch their heads at this development, but since their youngest child wasn't doing anything to harm his siblings, they turned a blind eye on some of his actions. I see, so that's it. 13 rubbed his chin as he looked at his brother's fighting stance. This is a bit surprising, but I guess this makes sense. 13 then walked towards his mother and asked for something that made Alessia arch an eyebrow. Mother, can you give me some Jin cores? 13 asked. 10 tier 1 cores will do. But if you have a Majin core, it will be better. There were 2 kinds of Jins that were prevalent in Solterra. The first one was the ordinary Jin. These monsters relied solely on their powerful bodies to fight. The second type of Jin was called Majin. They specialized in magic. Of course, there were Majins who could use both physical and magical attacks, making them one of the most dangerous creatures to fight. What are you going to use them for? Alessia asked with curiosity. I'll just play with them, 13 replied. Play with them? Alessia blinked in confusion. 13 nodded. Yes. In the future, I will ask for more. So if possible, please prepare a lot of them. Mother. Alessia didn't mind giving her son some Jin cores, but she was truly curious about what he would do with them. In the end, she gave 13 a magic pouch which contained 20 Jin cores and 3 Majin cores. Thank you, Mother, 13 replied. You will not regret this decision. After getting what he needed, 13 made a gesture for his brother to follow him. The two went to 13's bedroom because what he was about to do was something he didn't want others to see, not even his parents. After firmly locking the door, he ordered Mikhail to remove his shirt and sit cross-legged on the floor. His brother didn't ask anything and simply did as he was told. Although he was young, Mikhail could sense that his younger brother only wanted what was good for him, so he obeyed without question. Now, close your eyes, 13 stated as he placed 15 Jin cores around Mikhail's body. He also placed 3 Majin cores in front of him with a smile on his face. His original plan was to only teach Mikhail a basic skill, but since his mother had been generous, he decided to go all out and give his brother the best martial skill in his arsenal. As a system, he knew many kinds of martial arts. In fact, all systems did. They could grant these skills to their hosts once they accumulated enough system points to purchase things from the system shop. But since his power and authority as a system was stripped away from him, he was unable to impart his knowledge to someone the way he did to his hosts. However, there was still another way. 13 had diligently studied all of these martial arts, along with other information that he had recorded inside his core. He even made sure to use a forbidden technique to ensure that the skills and information would not be taken away from him, regardless if he died or not. That was the preparation he made before facing off against his father. He didn't know what the outcome would be, so he could only do everything he could, just in case the worst-case scenario happened. Thinking back, he was glad he did these things in advance. Now, even though he was no longer a system, all the information he needed was still inside his core, which was transplanted by the system god, inside his new body. Using a marker pen, he started to inscribe runes on his brother's body. Mikhail found this ticklish. And he even laughed a couple of times. 13 smiled seeing how happy his brother was. However, in order to stop him from moving, he gave him one good smack in the head, making the latter cry. But, seeing that 13 raised his fist a second time, Mikhail immediately stopped crying and no longer moved his body. "Good boy," 13 said as he lightly patted his brother's head before continuing to inscribe runes on his body. When he was done, he admired his handiwork before inscribing a rune that symbolized wisdom on the back of his right hand. "Now, time to start," 13 thought as he picked up one of the Majin cores with both hands in front of him. He then started to chant in a language that wasn't found in Pangaea. This was the language of the elves, who lived in Solterra. A moment later, the rune on the back of his right hand started to glow, allowing him to use the Majin core as a medium to empower the spell. While it was true that there were several restrictions on his body like skill ban and the likes, what he was using wasn't a skill that was available in Solterra and Pangaea. It was rune magic. A type of magic that used an external source of power to activate special runes, which symbolized words of power. This was a loophole that 13 was exploiting. His father must have never expected that the black sheep of his family would be using rune magic in a world where rune magic didn't exist. Also, he didn't expect 13 to have such knowledge because the latter no longer had access to the database of systems. At this exact moment, the system god, who was watching 13's antics, snorted after being one-upped by him. However, a smile appeared on Deus Ex Machina's lips because his son didn't know that he was breaking one of the rules of the world he was currently in. "Laugh while you still can, you fool," Deus Ex Machina smiled. "He is coming for you now." The most omnipotent being that governed Solterra and Pangaea detected an anomaly within its domain. Its gaze then landed on a 5-year-old child, who was doing something that he shouldn't be capable of doing as it was not supported by the laws that the omnipotent being had set upon the world. Even so, it didn't make any move to stop whatever 13 was doing because it was analyzing his actions and contemplating whether it should take the necessary actions to erase the 5-year-old child, who was breaking the rules of its world, or not. 13 shuddered subconsciously, having felt as if someone was staring at him from the heavens. Thinking that it might merely be his grumpy old man, he decided to ignore this feeling and continued to do what he was doing. Soon, the Jin cores surrounding Mikhail's body all glowed at the same time. Particles of light emerged from the cores and flew toward the runes that were inscribed on his body. The runes lit up one by one as they gathered magical energy from their surroundings. The 3 Majin cores turned into particles of light and were absorbed by the rune on the back of 13's right hand. When this was done, he pressed his index finger against his forehead and closed his eyes. He was copying the information from the God of War axe skill tree and channeling it all into the tip of his finger. The God of War martial skill was one of the skills that heroes and villains could buy from the system shop for 10 million system points. It was an endgame skill that a host could only usually afford after years of saving system points. Since these system points could only be gained by successfully completing quest missions or by unlocking hidden quests, collecting them wasn't an easy task. And yet, Mikhail was now going to inherit this martial skill for free, all because he was lucky enough to have 13 as his brother. Once he finished copying the skill, 13 then pressed his index finger on his brother's forehead, allowing Mikhail to learn the skill instantly. Of course, even after learning the skill, Mikhail wouldn't suddenly become a strong warrior immediately. He still had to study the skill inside his head and practice it diligently. Only by doing so would he be able to make the skill his own. 13 wasn't too worried about that. He was confident that Mikhail would be able to learn the techniques that 13 imparted to him naturally. The former was born to wield an axe, and it was surely his calling in life. Just like a fish who could swim since birth, Mikhail would be able to learn these skills as easily as breathing. Since I can't become OP in this world, I will make my siblings OP instead. 13 chuckled. Internally. Ha ha ha. Old man. I bet you didn't see this coming, did you? 13 was feeling good about himself because he believed that he had found a way to become strong in this world, which was by riding on the shoulders of giants. Since his growth was limited, he would let others grow instead. And through them, he would reap the benefits of his hard work. A few minutes later, the light in the room dimmed as 13 panted for breath. He had used himself as a medium to use rune magic, and it took a toll on his body. Even so, he didn't have any regrets even as he walked shakily toward his bed, somewhat rushing. Because he felt that he was about to collapse very soon. Mikhail was currently undergoing enlightenment, and it would be a while before he snapped out of his trance. Knowing that, 13 decided to rest for the time being to recover his strength. However, just as he was about to lay down on his bed, he found himself staring at what seemed to be a man with the face of a rabbit. Laplace demon, 13 muttered as he recognized the creature in front of him. Oh. Do you know me? The Laplace demon looked at the boy in surprise because it was supposed to be impossible for a 5-year-old to know who he was. Only those who had stepped on the Grandmaster rank, like 13's parents, had the opportunity to meet him. Currently, there were 10 known ranks when it came to the human rankings. They were Rookie, Adept, Apostle, Elite, Initiate, Master, Grandmaster, Champion, Thrones, and Monarchs. The 5 great clans were led by the 5 monarchs. The 10 prestigious families, on the other hand, were led by the 10 thrones. They were the strongest humans in the world, and each of them had enough power and ability to influence the decisions of the central government that governed the entire world. And now, he was currently looking at a creature whom he was only supposed to meet when he became a Grandmaster, which would not be happening anytime soon. Come with me, child, the Laplace demon said. The one wishes to speak to you. Can I not go? 13 asked back. The Laplace demon was the right-hand man of the one and usually handled things in its stead. The Laplace demon smiled as he picked up 13 like a sack of rice, placing the boy over his shoulder. Child, I am not asking for your permission, the Laplace demon stated. I'm simply informing you of what I am about to do. Without another word, the Laplace demon disappeared from the room, carrying the boy who had broken one of the rules of their world. A minute later, 13 found himself in a surreal place where countless galaxies could be seen around him. High above his head was a giant golden sun, who seemed to be the center of everything in this world. Child, do you know who I am? A voice filled with divinity sounded the boy's ears, to which the latter responded with a nod of his head. The one, I presume? 13 answered. It is indeed I, the one replied. Do you know why you are here? I have an idea, 13 replied. His tone wasn't being overly respectful, but he wasn't rude either. As someone who had met countless gods in the past, 13 was already used to talking to them. You are no ordinary child, the one stated. Originally, I planned to erase you from existence for breaking one of the rules of my world. But as I was about to do that, I realized that you do not possess a human soul. This is quite intriguing, so I decided to give you a chance to explain yourself and your actions. Depending on your answer, I might go ahead with my original plan of killing you, so choose your words well, child. 13 looked at the omnipotent being in front of him with a fearless gaze. Since he had been given a chance to live a life as a human, he would definitely not throw this chance away without a fight. It was at that moment when an idea popped up inside his head. If he played his cards right, he might be able to ask the one to remove the restrictions placed onto him by his father and live in the world of Pangea as a human with limitless potential. I'm willing to tell you what you want to know, but I'm afraid that words won't be enough, 13 said. Why don't you read my memories instead? That way, you will be able to understand everything. Interesting, the one replied. Bearing your everything to me without hiding anything. Are you doing this to preserve your life? 13 shook his head. No. I'm doing this so you will understand my goal in life. I didn't come into your world by choice. But that doesn't mean that I dislike being here. The one didn't reply right away. Instead, Laplace demon moved on its behalf and lightly tapped the 5-year-old's forehead, making him fall into a trance. A moment later, 2 beams of light shot out from 13's eyes, creating a projection similar to a movie screen. The one and Laplace demon watched intently to see what the secrets that the young boy was hiding from them. In the beginning there was chaos. Before the first worlds were born and life came into being, there was only darkness. Utter, absolute, darkness. And from within that endless darkness, love was born. Then light appeared. And from that day onwards, the birth of the universe started. That was how creation began. That was how the first gods came into being. The god of fire, water, wind, and earth. The god of wine, good harvest, family, and home. The god of lightning, storms, tides, and seasons. The god of music, god of laughter, and even the god of children were born. Primordial gods, personification gods, and lastly the new generation gods. They were the three types of gods who had been born within the temple of the 10,000 gods. They stood above the heavens, overlooking all of creation. The divine beings that stood above the mortal realm and held powers beyond their understanding. It was during that time, when the universe was still young and the concept of reincarnation and transmigration was just starting to flourish within the infinite number of worlds in the multiverse, that a new generation god with infinite potential came into being. This newborn god then created a small, yet beautiful world, and he called it Skadres. Using the power of his divinity, this god created beings, which he called the Super Yggdrasil. Synchronized technology enhancing manager, who would later be referred to as the system. These systems had different traits and abilities, and they were sent to different worlds in order to assist their so-called chosen ones, whom they had deemed worthy of their services. However, not all systems were created equal. All of them had varying specialties, and they helped different kinds of people. Some helped heroes, some helped villains, some helped cannon fodders, and some just randomly chose their hosts depending on their preferences. Overall, we all lived relatively peaceful lives until the Fire Nation attacked, is what I'd like to say. But the copyright god will certainly smack me in the face if I said that. I'm not bragging or anything, but I once helped the Gravator bring peace to his world thousands of years ago. The Laplace demon pushed the pause button of the remote control before looking at the 5-year-old with an incredulous look on his face. The one also felt as if they were being played with the child, but both of them knew that this was impossible. They were merely replaying his memories and prying on his secrets. 13 didn't even have any capacity to resist them, so what they were seeing and hearing was the truth, and nothing but the truth. Continue, the one ordered. The Laplace demon nodded and once again resumed playing 13's memories. Everyone run. He's here. Damn it. He killed 666. Run to the Nexus. That is the safest place we can be right now. Bastard. Why are you doing this, 13? Don't reason with him. He has gone berserk. Has anyone called the single numbers? 13 watched as those who had come on the same mission as him ran away in panic, while hurling curses and insults his way. Gone berserk? 13 asked with a devilish smile on his face. How rude. I am perfectly sane. Oh, sorry, let me end your suffering. A chuckle escaped his lips as he stabbed his lightsaber through a young lady's chest, who was pretending to be dead beside his feet. Yes. I am perfectly sane because no insane system would kill his brothers and sisters without even batting an eye, 13 muttered as he looked at the young lady. T13, you will not be able to get away with this, the young lady, whose beauty was enough to make any man or woman swoon when they saw her, said with a pained expression on her face. Don't worry, 13 replied. I don't intend to get away with this. You fool. Just because. The young lady wasn't able to finish her words because 13 sliced her head off from her body. It rolled a few meters away from him before coming to a complete stop, leaving her to give her killer only one last look as the light faded from her eyes. I won't ask you to forgive me, 14344, 13 said as he walked away. If fate permits it, you can have your revenge after my wish has been granted. Yes. Until his wish was granted, he would continue this madness. If this was the only way to get the system god to show himself, then he was willing to destroy everything that their father had created. As he walked towards the Nexus, which was the grandest building within the world of Skadres, a lone person stood to block his path. He had his arms crossed over his chest and was looking at his friend with a sad expression, which was the exact opposite of his character that 13 had grown fond of. 13. 69. A sigh escaped 69's lips before scratching his head. Are you sure about this? 69 asked. His long red hair faintly swayed as a gust of wind blew from the east. Once you leave this place, there is no turning back. I have no intention of turning back, 13 replied. Get out of my way, 69. You are the only one I don't want to kill. Is there really no other way? Kate won't be happy if you don't make me repeat myself. After hearing the name of his previous host, the anger that 13 had been holding back slowly rose to the surface, threatening to consume him and attack the only person whom he acknowledged as his friend among the systems. Perhaps sensing the killing intent that was oozing out of his friend's body, another sigh escaped 69's lips before shaking his head helplessly. Fine, 69 said as he moved to the side. Have it your way. The one friend he knew looked off into the distance as he decided to not stand in 13's way. As the renegade system walked past him, 69 opened his lips to give him one last piece of advice, or perhaps one last farewell, knowing that this would probably be the last time that he would be able to talk to his friend. Don't kill any of the single digits, 69 said softly. They have their roles to play. That will depend if they get in my way or not, 13 commented. Aside from you, there is no one in this world I don't dare to kill. Leaving his only friend behind, 13 headed towards the Nexus with renewed determination. Damn, that escalated quickly, Laplace Demon said as he munched on some popcorn. This is better than I thought. The one also shared his subordinate's sentiment. Neither of them expected this sudden turn of events, and were both now very eager to see the rest of 13's memories. *T. How is he this strong? 7 cursed internally as he was pushed back by the renegade system who had decided to declare war on their father. I'm a single number, yet he's overpowering me. Suddenly, his opponent disappeared from his view. Before he knew it, his right arm was cleanly sliced off his body, the pain soon making him scream. Just as 13 was about to sever 7's head, 3 people attacked him from 3 different directions, forcing him to back away. Don't let your guard down. He's strong. 7 warned his 3 comrades as he summoned a spear with his remaining hand. 3, 5, and 9 looked at 13 with solemn expressions on their faces. They hurried back to their home world the moment they received an SOS call from their headquarters. They were still looking for new hosts to serve, so they were able to return right away. Despite their timely return, the moment they stepped on their planet, they saw that countless systems had already been cut down. Their body parts littered about everywhere. Perhaps, the saving grace was that 13 didn't target their cores. Even if their bodies were destroyed, as long as their cores were intact, they could still be revived by the system god. Even though 13 was surrounded by hundreds of systems, he remained indifferent to his surroundings. No matter what methods they used. Even ganging up on him didn't work. It was as if he could read all of their movements and counter them without too much effort. After fighting against him, the systems felt as if they were facing against the strongest system. Optimus, who stood at the number 1 position among them. Unfortunately, Optimus wasn't around since he was still bound to his host. Just as 13 was about to move for the kill, a powerful divinity descended from the heavens, making all the systems sigh in relief. Satisfied, the system god, Deus Ex Machina, asked as he descended a few meters away from his son who had rebelled against him. Nothing will change even if you throw a tantrum, 13. The systems who were in the surroundings couldn't help but feel bitter when they heard their father's words. 13 had cut down hundreds of systems, their body parts still littered the ground. However, their father just called it a tantrum, making them feel helpless. So, you're finally here, old man, 13 sneered. Took you long enough. Deus Ex Machina scoffed. I can still overlook your transgression, 13. All you need to do is resume your role and do what you are programmed to do. That is all. 13 snorted. He already knew that this was what his father was going to say to him the moment he made his appearance. After billions of simulations, all of them resulted in the same thing. His father would kill him, and his futile attempt at rebellion would come to an end. But he no longer cared about this outcome. If living meant he would continue to suffer, then he would simply end it on his own terms. But, before he was erased from existence, he vowed to at least land a hit, filled with all of his resentment, on the system god's face. Give me your strength, Vincent, 13 said softly as an image of a handsome young man with short blonde hair and gray eyes appeared above him. Vincent was one of his hosts who had died a pitiful death. He was someone who didn't deserve to die, but since he was fated to die, he died. Not by the hands of his enemies, but by his own hands. Fate forced him to kill himself because none of the so-called heroes could kill him. The image behind 13 raised his sword and flashed a fearless smile on his face. 13 opened his mouth and recited the last words that his host had said before he died. Let my last stand be so bright that I will be known throughout eternity. 13 roared before a pair of golden wings made of energy protruded out of his back. Golden lightning bolts snaked around his body as well as his sword, filling him up with overwhelming strength. With a resolute expression on his face, 13 took a step forward and disappeared instantly. He reappeared right above the system god with his sword held high, ready to strike. Annihilate, 13 said in a cold tone. Ultima break. A blinding flash of light erupted the moment 13's sword descended upon his father. Everyone within a mile-long radius was blown away by the force of the attack. When the light receded, the systems who were still conscious at that time saw 13's sword being blocked by a single finger. 13, a system doesn't need a heart, Deus Ex Machina said as he disintegrated 13's sword with a flick of his finger. A moment later, countless steel spikes emerged from the ground, piercing 13's body and holding him in place. You failed as a system, Deus Ex Machina stated coldly as he pierced his son's chest with his hand. You are no longer a son of mine. You failed me first, father, 13 replied as he felt his body lose its strength because the system god had grabbed hold of his core. After perfectly sticking to my role for thousands of years, I should have been eligible for several wishes. And yet, I only asked you for a single wish, but you didn't grant it. Deus Ex Machina's gaze faltered a bit after hearing his son's words. Whenever a system completed its mission, they were allowed to ask him for one wish. 13 hadn't made a wish for thousands of years despite completing all of his missions successfully. However, before he rebelled, he asked the system god to grant a wish. His wish was to change the fate of his hosts, so they wouldn't remain cannon fodders till the end of time. But the system god denied his wish. This was the trigger that prompted 13 to rebel against him. I don't need a father like you, 13 said as the light in his eyes slowly faded. Remember this, old man. If by some miracle I revive, mark my words, I will screw you 10 times over. The system god scoffed before pulling the core out from 13's body, making the latter's body disintegrate. The projection that was being shown through 13's eyes disappeared, leaving only white noise. The two beings who watched everything from start to end remained silent as they looked at the 5-year-old, who was still in a trance. A moment later, the Laplace demon lightly tapped the boy's forehead, and a blue window appeared in front of him. Name, Zion Leventis. Age, 5 years old. Race, human. Skills, none. Items, none. Avatars, none. Permanent debuffs. Rank ban. Skill ban. Item ban. Avatar ban. Unique abilities, universal language proficiency. Gives you the ability to communicate with anyone and anything as long as they have a means of communication. Rank ban. You are only able to reach the first level of any rank. After this, you cannot increase that rank for the rest of your life. Example, the maximum level he can reach is level 1. No matter what he does, he will not be able to reach level 2. Skill ban. You will be unable to gain any skill or use any skill that belongs to the worlds that you are currently in. This included skills and abilities that were imbued into weapons. Learning skills through tomes, grimoires, and scrolls will give you nothing as well. Example, if the sword in your possession has the unbreakable ability in it, once it is in your hands, that ability will become inactive, meaning that the unbreakable sword will break just like any other ordinary weapon. This skill also applies to projectile weapons. Even if you use throwing daggers or a bow, the skill ban will still apply to them. Item ban. You will not receive any item drops from the monsters that you have killed. Treasure chests will not give you any rewards, and any other items that potentially give you any items will not work. Avatar ban. The world you are in has avatars. When you kill monsters, there is a chance that you will gain their avatar, allowing you to summon them in battle. You are unable to gain avatars through killing, trade, or any other means. Example, even if you manage to acquire an avatar using a loophole, you will be unable to summon this avatar and use it in battle. A cold hiss escaped the Laplace demon's lips after reading the information in 13's system window. Simply put, the system god made sure that the child in front of them would be crippled for life. However, he didn't anticipate that 13 would record all the information available to systems and integrate it into his core. Armed with this knowledge and his cumulative experience in assisting his hosts, 13 was able to find the loophole and use rune magic, which was an ability that didn't belong to the worlds of Pangea and Solterra. This was why he was kidnapped by Laplace Demon and brought to his boss so that the latter could give 13 his verdict. The one looked at 13's stats before shifting its attention to the 5-year-old, who was now lying on the ground, unconscious. Laplace Demon, I want to hear your opinion, the one said. If it were you, how would you handle this matter? The Laplace Demon didn't answer right away. Instead, it crossed its arms over his chest and closed its eyes. After seeing everything, it had developed a bit of bias towards the pitiful system who had decided to defy the system god for the sake of those he held sacred. 13 woke up with a head-splitting headache that made him flinch. It was as if countless needles were stabbed into his brain, making his face scrunch up. So, you're finally awake, the Laplace demon said while casually sipping a cup of tea. Stand up. Child. The one has already made its decision regarding you. The young boy gingerly stood up while enduring the pain in his head. Since he was still alive, that meant that the two beings in front of him had decided to spare him. However, until he heard their verdict, he decided to play it safe and wait for confirmation. After careful consideration, I've decided to spare your life, the one stated. I am rather vexed that a god has decided to take matters into his own hands and tamper with the rules of my world. But I can understand why he did it, so I will not be removing the restrictions on your body. 13 clenched his fists, not out of anger, but due to disappointment. He thought that the omnipotent being of the world would find his restrictions unjust and remove them using the authority he had over the world. However, the one's next words made 13 widen his eyes in surprise. While it is true that I will not be removing the restrictions imposed upon your body, I will allow you to strengthen yourself in any way possible. However, there will be limitations. I'm sure that you still have plenty of ways to exploit loopholes, so you have to tell us all the abilities that you plan to use in this world. Truth be told, I am very tempted to wipe your memories clean so that you will not remember anything, including the knowledge you possess. The only thing that is stopping me from doing that is my interest in seeing how you will survive with all the restrictions placed on you by the system. God. I will use you as a guinea pig to find the loopholes to the laws in my world, so I can fix them properly. For now, I will allow you to use rune magic up to the intermediate stage. Also, since I find you to be an interesting person, I've decided to bestow upon you a unique ability. As if waiting for those words, several rows of text appeared in front of 13, making him arch an eyebrow. Unique ability, Destiny Bond. Destiny Bond. You will feel the presence of the people who have a very strong connection with you. The stronger your feelings are for a person, the stronger the connection. If your feelings for them reach a certain threshold, it is possible to pinpoint their exact location using the strings of fate that bound you to them. Name, Zion Leventis. Age, 5 years old. Race, human. Skills, none. Items, none. Avatars, none. Permanent debuff. Rank ban. Skill ban. Item ban. Avatar ban. Unique abilities, universal language proficiency, destiny bond, rune magic, intermediate. Looking at his status window, 13 felt as if a new path had opened up for him. Although the restrictions were still in place, he believed that he would be able to exploit more loopholes as he used the knowledge in his possession. You will discuss the unique abilities that you plan to use in this world with Laplace Demon, the one stated. I gave him full authority to approve or reject any of the abilities that you plan to use. Make sure to not hide anything because a list will be created and a contract will be signed. If you do anything outside the conditions listed in the contract, you will immediately be erased. No questions asked. It was not only Laplace Demon who developed a bias towards 13. The one didn't lie when it said that it was annoyed with the system god for tampering with 13's body. Everyone whom the one had chosen to be spirited away would undergo a rebirth of sorts. Regardless of their disabilities, diseases, or circumstances, they would gain the perfect body once they appeared in Solterra. It was also possible for the restrictions on 13's body to be purged completely due to this rebirth, but this was very unlikely to happen. A god's restriction wasn't something that anyone could remove easily because it contained a part of their divinity. Because of this, the one decided to compromise. It believed that if 13 didn't have any restrictions placed on his body, it was very possible for him to become an overpowered existence, threatening to break the balance of the world. The one couldn't let this happen, so he didn't plan to remove the safety locks that the system God had given to 13. The contract that he proposed was also a fail-safe compromise, preventing 13 from using the knowledge he had from other worlds and abusing it. I don't know if I'm making a mistake or not, the one thought as he looked at the 5-year-old, who was busy arguing with Laplace Demon about one of the abilities that he wanted to be added to the contract. After a month of arguing, the list of abilities was finally finalized. 13 made sure to read the clause of the contract, and he even used a magnifying glass to read the small print that the Laplace Demon had added to it. The humanoid white rabbit wearing a black tuxedo found 13's antics quite amusing. He did add clauses that were too small to notice, yet the 5-year-old saw them and even asked for a magnifying glass to read them. After his father's betrayal of not granting his wish, 13 was a bit paranoid when it came to contracts and fine print. The 5-year-old read the 100-page contract 5 times before finally signing it, sealing the deal. Laplace Demon was a tough cookie to crack, and the demon had rejected a lot of 13's proposals. He made sure that the renegade system wouldn't become too overpowered and break the balance of the world. Although 13 was disappointed that some of his proposals didn't go through, he was still satisfied with the result. Since time in the celestial realm moved differently compared to the time in Pangaea, 13 returned exactly an hour after the Laplace demon had kidnapped him. The 5-year-old rubbed his palms together before chuckling like a mad scientist. Now that he managed to gain the approval of the big boss of the world, he decided to prepare for the time when he and his siblings would be sent to the world of Solterra for their first wandering. Thank you for watching, truckers.